Good morning, my wonderful students. Today we are learning about plot and conflict. Our objective today is I can identify the parts of plot and the types of conflict in a story. I'm going to wait. You can either pause the video or I'm going to wait a couple of seconds to make sure that you have your notes sheet open so that you can be taking the notes that you need during this video. One of the great things about the video is that you are able to pause so that you can make sure that you have the information that you need. This is called the plot diagram. And this, you're going to want to pause the video here so that you can fill it in on your note sheet. But we are going to go over the introduction exposition, the rising action complication, the climax, the falling action and the consequence, and the resolution denouement through this slideshow. In the introduction exposition, we are introduced to the main characters, the setting, and the conflict of the story. And I decided to use Cinderella to let you hear how this would work. So, fairy tale starts once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a girl named Cinderella, who lived with her wicked stepmother and wicked stepsisters. There you go. There is our exposition introduction to the story. Rising action, everything gets more and more complicated. We learn more about the characters and the conflict. So think about in Cinderella as we are learning about all the work she has to do for her sisters, the story about the ball, the fact that Cinderella wishes to go and nobody will let her, all of those activities that are happening that cause this issue to occur. The climax is the turning point in the story. Once the climax happens, nothing will ever be the same. So in Cinderella, this is the moment where she is at the ball and the clock strikes 12 and she must leave, and she accidentally leaves her slipper behind and the prince vows to find her. The story cannot be the same after this moment. We know that we will try to figure out who owns that slipper. In the falling action, events are put back together and we can see the ending coming soon. This is the search for the girl who fits the slipper. And when we get to Cinderella and he finally puts that slipper on, our falling action has concluded. In the resolution or denouement, the story is concluded and everything has been wrapped up. The story is completed. And Cinderella and the prince got married and lived happily ever after. The end. When it comes to a story, though, we also need conflict. And this is the second part of what we're talking about today. Conflict is defined as a struggle between two opposing forces. Without conflict, there is no story. A boy walked to school. That's not a story. We need the conflict. The boy was running late for school. Now there's something going on. We have two types of conflict. The first is external conflict. This is between a character and an outside force. So we have man versus man, man versus nature, and man versus society. Man versus man is when a character struggles with another character. It's the protagonist versus antagonist, the classic good guy versus bad guy situation. We see man versus man all the time in many different formats. You know that with the good guy versus the bad guy. Man versus nature is when a character struggles with a force of nature, natural disaster, desolation, an animal, etc. So those of you who are wondering about man versus animal, there you go. Usually in these stories, the character is struggling to survive against this force of nature. In Man vs. Society, a character or group of characters fight against the society in which they live. The Hunger Games comes to mind. The character fights against social traditions or rules, whether a fight for freedom, rights, or for a cause. The society becomes a character of its own. Usually, the story is a comment on positive or negative aspects of real society. The other type of conflict is internal conflict. An internal conflict is between a character and his or herself. So we call this man versus self. In Man versus Self, the character's struggle takes place in his or her own mind. It usually has something to do with a choice, whether they are choosing between right and wrong, or it may have to do with overcoming emotions or mixed feelings. Now I'm going to pause here for a second, because in many stories, we have both external and internal conflict. Our main character may be struggling with their own identity or who they are, or if they have enough strength to fight the antagonist in the man versus man conflict. And that lets us have that man versus self as well. There are three other types of conflict: man versus supernatural, man versus fate, and man versus technology. Now, these are just based on different kinds of stories and different kinds of events that are occurring, but they do exist, and so I did want to mention them. Okay, don't forget, remember to get your notes checked by me, and then begin working on your think sheet for plot and conflict with today's short story. I hope you got everything you needed and were able to pause and review those. I hope that you were able to get everything you needed for your notes and understood what we were talking about. Have a great day and good luck.